Welcome to the second installment of our Series 1 on Propulsion, Past, Present, and Future. I'm your host, Manhel Yunus. Welcome. Thank you for joining us again. Today, of course, we're joined by Brandon Yan and Brian White, our two Techno Trek analysts. We will be discussing propulsion of the present and all of the wonder things involved with that. Are you ready? Ready, set, go. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us today. Today we have Brandon Yan. Brandon, how are you today?
Fantastic.
That's great. And Brian White, of course. How are you, man?
Outstanding.
That's so great. Welcome to Techno Trek Tuesdays again. We're here to talk about interesting propulsion systems, past, present, and future. Today we'll be discussing those of the present, which is very exciting for me because I try to keep up with these things, but I'm not an engineer. I'm familiar with the physics. If I understand the math, I
Yeah.
could get to the math part of it, but like seeing how, like, when I see in the news or popular culture, like they do really cool and interesting things, I'm jazzed to go and see, the article, the source material, the reference point of what they're doing. And I'm not just it's going faster and faster and faster these days where they develop more and more of these technologies that are enabling us to use propulsion in new ways. It's almost like battery technology where we never really saw really advances in battery technology until we needed it. And the same thing's happening now, I think, with propulsion technology. So I will begin by throwing to Mr. Brandon Yan, our resident tech trek analyst, who will teach us a little bit about how we got to this point. Brandon, take it away.
Well, where we're at, how we got here, we talked about that in the last episode. But the
Mhm.
interesting part is there's still a lot of stuff that carries forward from how we got there to where we are now. One of the major things that we were talking about in the last episode is solid propulsion, and or solid fuel propulsion, and how certain things can be reused and certain things cannot be reused, liquid propulsion and how that can be non-reusable as well, and the different types of technology that we had used back from the 50s and the 60s all the way up to the 2000s. Most of that, yes, it's old tech, but guess what, we still use it.
If it
Sadly
ain't broke,
enough,
don't fix it.
exactly. Sadly enough, I would love to say that we have advanced past that currently. And in a lot of ways we have, but in some ways we haven't. Um, there's several things to touch on real quick, and that is the just to talk about a couple of things here. First, the X1 and the SR-71 Blackbird were
Mhm.
really early things that almost got us into space from a plane perspective, and we'll
Mhm.
talk about that a little bit later on. But just think about that. I want you to keep that in your mind, because those early aircraft, they weren't really early, but they were early enough that they don't really fit the current modern series of aircraft that we're talking about when we're talking about space, but they're really freaking close. So keep that in mind when we go back to that later on. Um,
Mhm.
Talking about modern stuff, we have anybody who knows anything about modern spaceflight or has been in the news or has listened to the radio or any of that kind of stuff knows SpaceX. knows their serious advancements in spaceflight technology, the reusable platform, the reusable launch system, the complete and reusable reentry vehicle, which builds off of the technology that we had on the
This is
space
it.
shuttle. That's
SpaceX.
it. Yep, that's the
Okay.
SpaceX. Yep. That's the Falcon 9, and every piece and every component in there, other than the fuel, is reusable.
Interesting.
So
Which will definitely save a lot of revenue in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. Because think about it. The space shuttle had this massive fuel tank that always burned up in the atmosphere. These massive solid filled
Yeah.
thrusters on the side that once expended, ejected, and burned up in the atmosphere and came down as debris that had to be salvaged, and it's like so much money was just kind of just
Wasted.
thrown into
Yeah,
the
yeah.
wind with these things.
Yeah.
Now we have the technology to launch vertically and land vertically thanks to SpaceX. On top of that, we also have Virgin Galactic, which literally is, for all intents and purposes, a space plane. The owner of that company. And then we've got Blue Origin here. And Blue Origin is Jeff Bezos, who's Amazon's CEO. That's
Right.
his thing. It's almost the same thing that SpaceX has. It just came a little later. So we have reusable spaceflight technology. It all started with the space shuttle. So, that was serious advanced technology at the time, but we've built on top of that and we've gone above that. And now we have this capability. We are still using solid chemical fuel thrusters in different aspects of it. Case in point, you ever go to a model store and you want to buy a model rocket? What do they have? Well, they don't give you tanks of, hydrazine or hydrogen and oxygen. No, they give you a solid fuel thruster
Yeah,
that you shove in the bottom of it. Exactly. So
sugar rockets, they call
we're
them.
still talking about, yeah, exactly. So we're still talking about travel propulsion. We still use those solid fuel thrusters, but at the same time, we've advanced our technology in the liquid stage quite significantly. The RCS systems that are in a lot of both old and new systems. The old is the good. The all the way back to the Gemini spacecraft. The reaction control and the reentry control systems. They used self-igniting propellants. So you're not talking about throwing a spark against anything. You're literally putting two chemicals together that ignite. And those chemicals were nitrogen, exactly, nitrogen tetroxide, and I have a really hard time saying this, monomethylhydrazine.
Okay.
Did I say that right? I think I pronounced that right.
I think so.
Sounds about right.
But when they combine, they create an explosion, which is really interesting, but it's completely controlled. You put that in a bell housing and you have yourself an RCS thruster that can point in one direction. You have enough small tanks of those that you can have nozzles. Boom, there's your RCS system. And even Star Trek uses the RCS system. You'll hear them talk about it all the time. Engage the RCS thrusters, or the dead slow thrusters, or something like that. You'll hear Tom Paris talking about all that kind of stuff.
And maneuvering thrusters is
maneuvering
is what they
thrusters.
Call them, yeah.
Exactly. Now, if you really want to look at some interesting stuff, take a look at the schematic of the Delta Flyer at some point. There's pictures all over everywhere. You'll notice that there's yellow patches on the hull on different corner points. Those are RCS thrusters. So that right there. Now, I don't know if they're using ion thrusters in Star Trek in the future there, but the same concept of having an RCS with non-ignitable technology is exactly what they're using there. We're also talking about ion propulsions for low Earth orbit items, such as certain types of orbital probes or satellites, or even on the ISS. The ISS stabilization system is ion propulsion and ion thrusters. And I'll let Brian talk about the ion system here in a little bit. If you really, one of the most interesting things that actually just hit my Facebook page is SpinLaunch. If anybody's interested to find out what that is, go to spinlaunch.com, check it out. It's one of the most innovative space launching systems I've ever seen. And I've been thinking about this for years, going, how come we don't do this? It literally has a it's an
It's
electromagnetic
amazing.
motor
Yeah.
in the
Yeah, yeah.
center that spins an object around the outside till it hits release velocity, and then it ejects it out into the launch tunnel and straight up into space.
Yeah.
You want to give us the next shot there, Manny, on the
Sure,
one on
sure.
the ground of what it looks like? Because
Yeah, yeah.
this is like one amazing piece of equipment that I think is going to absolutely revolutionize uh, space, not necessarily space travel, but travel in a way. Because if we can get supplies into orbit cheaply,
Mhm.
we can start constructing an orbital dry dock.
Yeah.
There's our way of going into space flight and going into the future. Right here,
Now,
this
The
right here,
rate
spin launch.
the rate limiting
now,
step
this by
is
no
getting it up there.
means, yeah, this by no means is for manned space flight. By the
Oh,
way,
of course not. No. But this is just for cargo. But even
Yes.
if we can ship cargo into space,
It makes it
then we
cheaper.
can get up there easier, and then we can build and launch from
We
there.
already
So
have
that's
cool self-assembling pieces.
and
So if you send
stuff,
things,
yeah.
it'll self-assemble.
and something like this would lend itself to building lighter, faster, more maneuverable spacecraft for
Oh,
manned
Yes.
flight.
absolutely.
Because you wouldn't have to take the cargo with you. The cargo would already be there waiting for you when you
Mhm.
got there.
Exactly. And it also will allow us to think about it. If we don't have to launch from Earth in a vehicle, I mean, we still do to get up there, but we're
Yes.
talking we can build a space cargo freight hauler that can go from here to the moon, or from here to Mars, or from here to the edge of our solar system, and then
Right.
back. So here is our way of getting that constructed. This is
Yeah.
awesome. I'm glad to see it. This is modern tech right here. This is what we need.
Yeah,
So
and we already
this
have
is exciting.
unmanned. we already have unmanned space flights going to places like Mars and things of that nature, where we can't go yet. But
Yeah.
I mean, they
This
could
is the next
retrofit
step.
those into being cargo haulers and things of that nature, so we can get these things into orbit and then assemble them there.
Exactly. Now, if you want to really jump off the deep end with me, I'm going to put this out there. One little thing: jump off the deep end. If anybody's seen the movie Gravity,
I haven't.
it's
No,
What's it about?
it's
Is
an
that the George
adrenaline
Clooney
ride.
one?
No, it's I can't. It's Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock.
Sandra
Okay,
Bullock
yeah.
And if you want to
and,
talk about
George
propulsion
Clooney.
in space in a very minor way, watch that movie because she does some really
Okay.
weird stuff, and it looks very practical. I don't know how practical it really is, but it's an adrenaline ride. So
Okay.
don't drink any coffee because you won't need it. But anyway, so that's jumping off the deep end.
That was cool.
Now, to make shift into the next series of stuff that we want to talk about, I'm going to toss this over to Brian. But one of the amazing things that I've always thought about is an electromagnetic launch system.
Mhm.
So how come we can't just put something on a sled and launch it into orbit? Well, guess what? Enterprise did that.
Yep.
Enterprise, Season 2, Episode 24, First Flight. Take it away, Brian.
Yep. That was the NX Alpha and the NX Beta. That was their program for seeing if the Warp 5 engine would actually work. Unfortunately, the NX Alpha was destroyed, as we all know, because RJ took it a little too far. But if you'll notice, when they basically stole the NX Beta, the launch delivery system that they used, they started out on a horizontal plane. They ignited their booster rockets or whatever, and then they went up at an angle into a vertical flight. So essentially, in theory, we could do that with electromagnetics. The problem is like, think of it like a rail gun.
Yes.
The rail guns that we have now, the unfortunate bit is the projectile that we have that we launch out of a rail gun is superheated. So we need to figure out a way to either allow the material that we launch out of the electromagnetic rail system to withstand those extreme heats, or we need to figure out some other sort of delivery system, almost like a catapult system.
I didn't realize there was a heating element to the electromagnetic.
Yes, the electromagnetic field superheats the tungsten that they use as a projectile. So basically, by the time it leaves the end of the railgun, it's almost a molten material that cools in the air as it travels towards its target. And
Tungsten.
that's kind of the problem because you can't realistically put a manned spacecraft inside of something like that and expect anything to survive.
No, not at all.
So, I mean, you
Kind of
could
like to see what happens after the fact.
well, I'm sure the pilots
the
of that
twisted
particular thing, yeah. But the thing is we could also theoretically use something like that for cargo transport, much like the spin launch system.
Brian, can I interrupt? Sorry. Just what
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
as we were just discussing about rail guns and shooting stuff. That's kind of old tech. Is there a newer tech? Are we? I've read now a little bit about ion propulsion and how it's being used in current satellites. Have you?
Okay, so ion thrusters are, by their very nature, essentially a propellant that is accelerated by an electromagnetic field. So essentially, like a railgun, it propels the fuel out of the end of the propulsion system, thus propelling the whatever forward through space. It's not very practical in atmosphere, but it works very well in outer space and things of
In a
that nature.
vacuum.
it's
Yeah,
currently being tested, right?
it is currently being tested. There are several different types. Like, for example, the Hall effect thruster is one of them, which is essentially, like I said, it uses a magnetic field to propel the propellant out of the thing. Something like xenon or krypton. As a matter of fact, I believe the Hall effect thrusters are what we are currently using on satellites, or
They're
something very
actually
similar to it.
exactly, yeah. They're currently used on. I'm going to throw SpaceX in here again. They're currently used on Elon Musk's. I can't think. I even
Uh,
have it right here in front of me somewhere.
yeah, the
The
Starlink
the Starlink
satellites.
satellites, exactly. Yes,
Oh, interesting. That makes
that's how they
sense.
stay it. That's how they
Yeah,
stay
the
in low Earth
Starlink
orbit.
internet
Okay.
satellite. Yeah, the Starlink satellite internet satellites. But the thing is like they're also working on replacing the fuel with you know with iodine. So they're working with the reason why they haven't done that so far is because iodine in its very nature is very corrosive. So essentially, it's not it wasn't as efficient as a fuel, but they figured out a way to do that using ceramics or something like that.
Mhm.
But there's also other types of fuel as well, like cryogenic fuels, which is what we are currently using. We have things like hydrogen and oxygen, which normally are gases, but when they're super cooled, they turn into a liquid, kind of like liquid nitrogen. It's
Yeah,
when it's exposed to an oxygenating thing, what's the term I'm looking for here? Oxidizer. When it's exposed to an oxidizer, such as oxygen, it turns back into a gas.
Mm.
Well, in certain combinations, it will actually ignite as a fuel, like hydrogen and oxygen. If hydrogen is exposed to oxygen, it will ignite and produce thrust. And so that's what we're currently
in
using.
in some aspects of it, yeah. Now, typically they're both inert gases, so when they
Correct.
combine, you get water.
Yeah. By our
But
powers combined, I am
sometimes,
Captain Planet. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Now, another thing that we're working on as well is solar sails. A lot of you may remember the episode of Deep Space Nine where Benjamin Sisko and Jake Sisko went on a little sailing trip to try to recreate there's the solar the Bajoran solar ship there, but they were trying to recreate the journey that a particular individual took to
Cardassian,
the Denorius belt,
through the
and
Denorius
they
belt to
ended up
Cardassian,
in
yeah.
Cardassian space. Well, they were using solar sails to propel themselves, and it's based on the the solar radiation that is produced by the sun that propels the solar sails forward. Yeah, here's a picture of an actual solar sail that we actually use today, or something quite similar to it. So this is actually a thing that we have now. Um, and let's see, it was originally let's see, it was launched in 2010 on something called the Icaros,
Yes,
but
the
it was
Icarus.
proposed earlier than that, like back in the 1980s. But they
Hmm.
just now got around to trying to figure it out.
Nice.
Um, Another type is plasma thrusters. Now, plasma thrusters are actually kind of interesting because the best way I know how to describe it is it's essentially a barbecue lighter, or like a butane like torch, kind of like this. You have your electric ignition, and then you have your fuel that comes out. Uh, Essentially, the plasma thing is the same thing. It has two
Right.
electrodes. It ignites the fuel, and it creates a plasma that propels the ship forward.
Lovely.
Welcome to a
Okay.
thruster that is click, click, boom.
I do
Exactly.
have. Thanks, guys. I do have one question actually. It's
Okay.
specifically for Brandon, because I wanted to ask this. I've often wondered like why we can't just shoot a plane into outer space. Like why do we have suborbital and like orbital planes? Like what's going on with the plane itself that we can't just shoot it immediately into space? Like I've either seen like other planes like refueling or sitting on top and then they launch it from like the other plane or whatever. But like why is that the case, Brandon?
Well, honestly, it comes down to one simple factor: weight. The amount of volume inside of the craft to launch the weight of the supplies, the people, the payload, everything else that needs to go into space. The amount of weight necessary, equivalent to the amount of fuel, plus the fuel you have to carry,
Hmm.
you are packing some serious pounds. The shuttle, the old shuttle, weighed before between 4.4 and 4.5 million pounds. That's the shuttle. That's not the carrier or the solid thrusters or the giant fuel tank. That's the shuttle. Its payload alone to go to a low Earth orbit was 27,000 pounds. To go to the ISS was 35,000 pounds. So we're talking, think about the fuel requirements for that. That
Hmm.
kind of stuff can't just be launched into space. It's just not possible.
Hmm.
The current most recent spacecraft to launch to Mars with the Perseverance rover, I believe, weighed itself 8,000 pounds. The rover itself is 2,500 pounds. So we're still looking at some serious weight. Which weight, man, you know the equivalents, the math, and the science on that part of it.
It's a
To
lot.
get something off the ground,
Yes.
the thrust required, and then the fuel required.
Right. It has to
It's
maintain
just
that accelerating depth all the way
exactly.
through. And it's just so heavy
Yeah.
to
So it
move any
comes
pe
right
Yeah.
down. Exactly, it comes right down to weight. If we
Yeah.
had no weight, we could get to space easy.
Wonderful. Well, that
Hmm.
makes sense. I'm really happy we had this conversation. I think we're going to put a pin in it there. I think we've explored some really cool options, some really interesting ideas. I hope you at home have enjoyed this conversation. Please remember to like and subscribe if you want to like and subscribe. Hit us up in the comments below from week to week, and we can take some of your opinions and
If
options.
there's
And
something we missed, tell us.
yes, please,
Yeah,
please let us
absolutely.
know. And that is about it for us here at Techno Tuesday. Please join us next week when we go into the technology of propulsion of the future. We talk probably a little bit more about Star Trek,
Oh
and
Hmm.
yeah.
I'm not gonna, ruin it. I'm just gonna let you know, like maybe this will, there's a lot of stuff that is like theoretical, and it's a lot of Star Trek is actually based on real math. So we'll
Oh
probably
yeah.
be exploring some of those things together. So until then,
Absolutely.
thanks for stopping by and we'll see you guys later.
Yep.
Have yourself a wonderful day.
Yep. Jolan True.